This is Caitlin Saposi-Belknap, your host for the monthly live report for Move to Amend, coming to you live from Sacramento, California, where I live. I also have my cat who jumped into my lap right as we started, so we'll see what happens here. As always, you can find us here normally on the last Wednesday of every month at 5 o'clock Pacific, on Facebook Live and Twitter too, and on Instagram on my phone. Those of you on Instagram might want to jump over to Facebook or Twitter, because if you want to get in on the prizes that we do, we can only offer those through Facebook and Twitter. So feel free to hop over there. Otherwise, just hi, and I'll talk you through things, but I won't be able to offer you any prizes. Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. And we always give out some prizes, and we're doing our t-shirts. So at the end of the show, I will share two lucky winners, one from Facebook and one from Twitter, who will get a free t-shirt. In order to be eligible to get in on this, you need to share this live feed with the hashtag #MoveToAmend. So share it if you're on Facebook, and retweet it if you're on Twitter, and we'll pick one winner from each platform to take home a t-shirt. And we really could use your help spreading the word, so please make sure to do that. Let's see, what else did I want to say? All right, I'm a little distracted by the cat here, but that's how it goes. Also, just so everyone knows, if you make a donation to Move to Amend between now and the end of the year of at least $28, we're about to launch our big end of the year fundraising push, and we need to raise $150,000 before the end of the year so that we can end the year in the black and start off 2020 strong. So everyone who donates over $28 or more will be entered into a raffle, and we'll be drawing on Tuesday, January 7th, for our first webinar of the year. We'll draw some winners of some items from Move to Amend store. So thanks for joining me. This is our last show of 2019 and also our last show of the decade. And I've been talking a little bit about, over the last couple shows, how Move to Amend is 10 years old. So I'm going to do a little bit of highlights from the last 10 years. We launched in the fall of 2009 in preparation for the Citizens United decision, and then that decision came down in January 2010. So I want to walk through some of the highlights of the last 10 years and how we've gotten to the point that we're at now, and then also talk about some things that are up ahead. But first, as we always do, we're going to go through some of the corporate rule news. So hang on one sec, and I'll be back to share with you the highlights from the land of corporate rule. All right, it's that time of the year. The holidays are here, the time we're expected to spend and make companies even richer, all while they only share crumbs with their employees. And nothing better to start the holiday season off than firing employees, right, Google? The company that used to pledge that they wouldn't be evil fired their 5th worker activist in just 1 month. Catherine Spires, a 21-year-old security engineer who had worked for Google since February 2018, was suspended from work on November 25th, the same day that 4 other worker activists were fired for what the company described as, quote, intentional and often repeated violations of our longstanding data security policies. Whatever. Actually, what was going on is Catherine and these other workers were talking about forming a union. So Catherine says, I had been involved in other workplace organizing in the past, but the reason I wanted to push this change was a combination of Google hiring IRI, a firm known for their anti-union efforts, and 4 of my coworkers being fired the same day, Spare said. This is blatantly Google targeting activists who are employees that are pushing back against the recent policy changes that, according to hundreds of their employees, are attempting to silence workers. And in other shitty corporate news, recently Yahoo's 24/7 Wall Street column sought to identify the nation's 10 worst paying employers. And to the surprise of nobody, Walmart came out on top, achieving the distinction of being the worst paying company in America. Surprise, surprise. Walmart's associates are often paid so poorly that, for example, in Canton, Ohio, in northeastern Ohio, they have an annual Thanksgiving drive to collect canned food for fellow Walmart employees in need who don't make enough money to pay their bills, and so giving to the needy right as their coworkers. This is just totally unacceptable. A company worth billions of dollars, and the family that owns Walmart is literally making hundreds of thousands of dollars, a day, and they can't pay its employees a livable wage. But of course they can, and they should. Every hardworking American should be able to afford their basic needs like food and a roof over their head. And speaking about a roof over your head, we have a housing crisis in America. Some articles came out recently. So I should have mentioned Alfonso will be sharing throughout this stream articles referencing the things I'm talking about. So feel free to retweet or share those. So speaking of the housing crisis, there have been a few articles that have come out around the Bay Area in California. So I live in Sacramento, California, which is a couple hours north of the Bay Area, but at this point the housing crisis is affecting much more than Californians as well, although our state is one of the worst. So the Bay Area's 10 largest cities combined sport 3 empty homes for every 2 persons without one. So for every 2 homeless people, there are 3 homes that are empty at the moment. San Francisco alone has nearly 5 empty houses per homeless resident. Oakland has a ratio of 4-to-1. Concord has the highest homeless count in Contra Costa County, estimated at 350 this year, with a vacancy rate of over 1,400. Santa Rosa, which folks who don't live in California may remember as a town that last year had the year before last had really terrible fires. So 1,800 homeless people in the most recent count, but 3,157 vacant homes. San Jose, which is in the southern Bay Area, has the second highest estimated homeless population after San Francisco, 6,000 people homeless, and also has the second most home vacancies estimated at almost 1,400 homes that are just sitting empty that nobody is occupying. Like I said, I live in California, so I can attest to how bad this crisis is. We have some of the fastest climbing rent rates in the nation, and people are being kicked out of their homes because they're unable to keep up with their ridiculous rent hikes. You're seeing more and more homeless people all over the place. In 2018 alone, Sacramento, again where I live, saw rent increases an average of 8.2% to 9%. The suburbs are not far behind. 7% rent increases. So there's really nowhere that you can live that you're not seeing this. And this is true of cities all over America. So modest single-family homes owned for generations by families now are held by corporate vehicles with names that appear to be little more than jumbles of letters and punctuation. A lot of the renting is done through property management companies. So, you don't even really interact with human beings as landlords. The Census Bureau reports that nearly 3 million U.S. homes and 13 million apartment units are owned by LLCs, LLPs, LPs, or shell companies. And a lot of that happened with the housing crisis, and then banks buying up getting back homes that people defaulted on their mortgages, and then now companies are holding those homes. So new glittering towers filled with empty condos look down over our cities as residents below struggle to find any available housing. In an article for Reveal, James Wright, an attorney and former Treasury Department bank examiner, shared how this is reminiscent of, quote, Moldova after the fall of the Soviet Union, oligarchs running wild, stashing their guns in buildings. The connection between corporate land development, rent increases, and homelessness seems too many to count. So a shout out to one of our amazing interns who just wrote a piece on this subject. It's not published yet, but we'll soon be putting it on our website, and we're going to try and get it published in some places to make the connections between corporate land development, rent increases, and homelessness. It's an incredible story about how corporate greed, another way that corporate greed is destroying our country. And while you're on our website checking out that article, you should check out more examples of corporate rule, and be sure to check out one that we published in April titled The Case of Synthetic Constitutional Rights, because there's a new film that came out based on the 2018 documentary The Devil We Know. It's just opened and is playing in theaters around the country. So the new film is called Dark Waters. And both films, Dark Waters and The Devil We Know, and our corporate rule stories talk about how DuPont chemical manufacturers lost a class action lawsuit against citizens in West Virginia, where an unknown amount of carcinogenic chemicals called C8 was being leaked into their waterways as untreated chemical waste. And then an independent report found that the chemical exposure was linked to thousands of cancer cases. DuPont lost a class action lawsuit totaling 3,500 individual lawsuits, costing the corporation $16 million. Put into perspective, DuPont Corporation makes $25 billion in revenue each year, so $16 million is a tiny fraction. Just the cost of doing business. Who knows, they could probably write it off their taxes. So it's a victory in one sense, but this minimal amount can be chalked up as simply cost of doing business. The larger issue is untested and unregulated chemicals, but the even larger issue is corporate rule. So this film and our corporate rule story examples offer the perfect opportunity to collect, move to amend petition signatures, and make the case for the We the People Amendment, or HJR 48, which again will make clear that only human beings have constitutional rights, and also that spending money in political campaigns is not protected by the First Amendment, so therefore it can be regulated and or restricted and or banned, and we could have publicly funded elections. So that's the amendment that we're working to pass. We'll share a printable half-page handout drawing the connection of DuPont's unchecked corporate power and continuous abuses to corporate personhood, and the urgency to pass our 28th Amendment that abolishes all corporate constitutional rights and money defined as free speech. And then you can download and print our petition sheet and gather as many signatures as you can. So Alfonso will share that for Facebook and Twitter followers. And take a minute to share all this with your friends and family. Saving the environment is crucial, and it's up to all of us, since corporations don't about polluting our planet. And speaking of unchecked corporate pollution, the National Academy of Sciences recently found that a February 18th blowout at an Exxon-owned natural gas well in Ohio blasted more methane than the reported emissions of entire countries such as France or Norway on that day. Methane is roughly 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon. Climate activists have been warning about it for years, and the transition from coal to natural gas, and how problematic that is, but it's been largely ignored. Methane emissions are not very well understood, and so we don't even really know how much is being emitted. So as the House of Representatives is impeaching Trump, I can't help but think about how really just about every single member of Congress deserves to be impeached, at least anybody who's been there for any amount of time, or recalled, booted, just gone, for their complete failure to govern on our behalf for the last 40 years, which is how long I have been alive. So my entire lifetime, since the threat and implications of climate change have been well documented and known by them, but ignored in the interest of protecting fossil fuel corporations. So as long as I've been alive. So anybody, some of them have been in office that whole time. Nancy Pelosi. But many of them have, been in there long enough to certainly have known. So we're thinking about, 30, 40 years of knowing about climate change. It's been 134 years next year since the Supreme Court first declared that corporations should have constitutional protections. And next year in January will be 10 years since the Citizens United decision that launched Move to Amends Coalition. And the damage done to our planet in all that time is just colossal and in many ways irreparable. So we must end corporate rule before it ends us. But I do want to just note one little good piece of news from the main movement that has been countering corporate power for generations, the labor movement, 18 months after the Janus versus AFSCME ruling, which aimed to take out labor unions, they're actually doing okay, believe it or not. So the Janus decision was a case in the Supreme Court, which made it so that even though all represented workers benefit from having a union that is, negotiating on their behalf, the Janus ruling ruled that workers could opt out of paying their dues as supposedly First Amendment protected speech, because money is speech. And so there was a lot of concern that a lot of workers would stop paying union dues, which would then make it impossible for unions to do the work that they do to advocate for workers. But despite the fact that think tanks like ALEC and the State Policy Project launched a huge opt-out campaign after the ruling with websites, they mailed mailings, emails, they knocked on doors, they distributed literature at workplaces, and they put up billboards trying to encourage unionized workers to opt out of paying their dues. It was extremely ineffective, and the membership drop since this ruling has been less than 1%. So Janus is still very dangerous ruling for labor in terms of possible future implications, but for now, the labor movement is still fighting for working people in this country, and it did not lose much ground, as everyone feared, thanks to unions stepping up and organizing their members to understand how important union representation is, which was something that wasn't really happening as well as it was because of the Janus decision. So good job, organized labor, for keeping yourselves afloat. We need you. And nice try, ALEC, etc. But unionized workers generally do understand how important and useful and critical their unions are, and they want to stay with them. So that's great news. You're listening to Move to Amend's monthly live report. I'm Caitlin Saposi-Belknap, Move to Amend's national director. Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. A reminder that we need your help sharing this broadcast. So if you would please retweet this with the hashtag Move to Amend, or share it to your Facebook friends with the hashtag Move to Amend, and we'll pick one person from Twitter and one person from Facebook at the end of the show to win a t-shirt, a Move to Amend t-shirt, for helping us spread the word. So next up, we'll be talking about updates from the campaign. And because this is the last show of the decade, I'm actually going to walk through some highlights going all the way back to the beginning. So stay tuned with me, and we'll be doing campaign updates in just a sec. All right, so I've been thinking a lot about the last 10 years as we close out 2019 for a lot of reasons. As I mentioned, I turned 40 this year, so that feels like a big deal, and just closing out the decade. But also, 10 years ago, we formed Move to Amend to prepare for the Citizens United ruling. And a lot of people don't realize this, because Move to Amend, we've done a pretty good job of getting ourselves out there. People, even if people are not active with us, they've, heard about this campaign in response to Citizens United, heard about corporate personhood. So I want to take you back a little bit to what it was like in September, October 2009, 10 years ago. So when we formed Move to Amend, basically it was the group of people who had been working against corporate personhood for the past many years, before that. I started working on this issue in 2001. Some of my colleagues had been working on this longer than I, so going back 20 years now. So it was basically just 12 brilliant people. We'll say, besides, I was there, but I'm talking about my colleagues and awesome folks who helped form Move to Amend with me, in a living room. And we came together as representatives from various organizations like the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I worked for an organization called Democracy Unlimited of Humboldt County, which was a locally based group in far northern California, the Alliance for Democracy, Ultimate Civics, Liberty Tree, organizations that, unless you've kind of been in the loop, the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy, you might not know about, because we were a relatively small network of people who were mostly doing history, research, education on kind of the story of how it came to be that corporations had constitutional rights, because like I said, that goes back over 130 years. So it did not start with Citizens United, contrary to sort of the popular mythology. And we were, in some ways, we worked together, but also in some ways we had ways that we were kind of vying for the same support. But we wanted to have a discussion about whether it made sense to finally, in preparation for this, Citizens United decision that we expected to come down the way that it had, the arguments had already been done. And we expected the Supreme Court to rule against the FEC and to expand the power of not just corporations, but individuals to contribute money to the political process. But we wanted to make sure that people understood that this isn't just a campaign finance issue, that this was actually this Citizens United is what happens when corporations have constitutional rights, which is something that they already had for over 100 years, thanks to the Supreme Court. And so we decided that while most of us were doing local work against corporate power and for democracy, we thought that it made sense to put out a call for, a constitutional amendment to overturn the court. So we started to put together a website that would do that, and we just got ready. We didn't know when the ruling was going to come down. It turned out to come down on January 21st, 2010. And honestly, we did not expect the response that we got. That's the part that a lot of people don't realize. We thought, maybe if we're lucky, we can kind of help shape the media narrative so that it's understood that this is not just about money and politics. This is not a campaign finance problem. This is a democracy problem. This is a hijacking of our Constitution problem. And to contextualize the Citizens United decision in this whole idea of corporations having constitutional rights or corporate personhood. And that worked out really well. There was actually a good amount of media that kind of explained it that way. A lot of times it ended up being, presenting it as if this was a new idea. But nonetheless, the sort of underlying root of the problem was surfaced. And then we had literally tens of thousands of people sign our petition, and thousands of people say that they wanted to volunteer and get involved in this campaign to amend the Constitution. And I mean, we didn't even have a headquarters. We had no paid staff. We had a few of us who were paid staff for other organizations. Most people were volunteers who launched Move to Amend. And we had to put together a campaign to do what we had put out a call for because the response was so tremendous. So we actually spent the first couple years kind of catching up with the grassroots and setting up local chapters and responding to all the people who said, I want to do Move to Amend. So one of our the first thing that happened is two brothers, Robin and Laird Monahan from Minnesota, contacted us and said they wanted to walk across the country to spread awareness about this issue. These were people that we didn't know. They decided that they wanted to work with Move to Amend. Laird Monahan has since passed away. Rest in peace to him. His brother, Robin, is still an active Move to Amend volunteer in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So they walked across the country and ended in Washington. They started in California and met us for the first time, and then walked across the country, spreading word and traveling to towns and having little rallies all over, and then they ended in Washington, D.C. One of the first tactics that we employed, which has been one of our most successful campaigns across the country, have happened to pass resolutions calling on Congress to pass the amendment. So initially we were calling for folks to pass those through their city councils, and those started to happen right away. But in 2011, so a year after we formed, the first resolutions were passed by ballot initiatives, so citizens collecting signatures to get a measure on the ballot calling on Congress to pass the amendment. So that's a great education opportunity. They had to collect the signatures, so explain this to people in that process. And then on election day, so Madison, Wisconsin and Boulder, Colorado were the first two towns to pass ballot initiatives. In 2011, we wrote the amendment, the We the People Amendment. So when we first launched, we didn't have the amendment written, and we ran that by our, at that point, numerous volunteers who were actively engaged with Move to Amend by having local groups. And they signed off on our amendment. We chose the name the We the People Amendment. It wasn't introduced in Congress yet for a couple more years. 2011 and 2012, we saw some big cities pass resolutions. So up until that point, it had been smaller towns like Madison and Boulder. But in Los Angeles was the first large city to pass through their city council a resolution. New York City passed a resolution in 2012. We also did Occupy the Courts. So Occupy in 2011 was a big moment for Move to Amend in many ways, because a lot of the Occupy activists kind of used the rhetoric and language of corporate rule, which was obviously what Occupy Wall Street was responding to. A lot of Move to Amend activists started off as Occupy activists. And so we did Occupy the Courts, and we held rallies at federal courthouses in almost every single state, calling on for the amendment and basically protesting the legal system. And that was really successful. We got a lot of good press from that. Also in 2012, we launched a campaign with Ben Cohen, the ice cream mogul, who started Stampede to Amend with us. So we actually had a vehicle that Ben commissioned that stamped money with messages like corporations are not people, money is not speech. And it was kind of like a Rube Goldberg, Burning Man sculpture that traveled the country with Move to Amend activists doing events all over and then stamping people's money. And we still have the stamps, and that's still one of the main outreach tools that we use. Colorado and Montana became the first states to pass ballot initiatives calling for an amendment to overturn Citizens United, and Montana in particular making clear that corporations are not people and money is not speech. We had regional convergences all over the country. And again, remember, this is like, we didn't have staff. So we just built this from people putting in their sweat equity over time. I actually left my job at Democracy Unlimited and came on to, Move to Amend's payroll, and we started to grow our staff and have people dedicated to this all the time. But a lot of this work was done by volunteers, and still a lot of our work is done by volunteers. We passed local ballot initiatives all over the country. So we started doing more and more, like Madison and Boulder had done in 2014. So the We the People Amendment was first introduced in Congress in 2013. We ended that Congress, I think it was the 113th Congress, or maybe it was 112th. We had 3 co-sponsors. So shout out to Mark Pocan and Rick Nolan, who's no longer in Congress, and I'm not even remembering who the third was. But we had it reintroduced again in 2015. And then we ended with a lot more co-sponsors. We adopted our strategic plan in 2016. Alfonso will share the link to that. We passed ballot initiatives in Washington and California in 2016. And big shout out to the folks in Washington, because they had to collect signatures, and they actually had to do that campaign twice. They collected over 300,000 signatures to get it on the ballot in their state. They just missed the number that they needed the first time. And so instead of giving up, they rallied and they relaunched their campaign, and then they got it and put it on the ballot. In California, we got the state legislature to put it on the ballot. So both of those 2 initiatives passed in 2016. We launched our Pledge to Amend campaign in 2016. So that's our campaign to target people who are running for office, whether they're running for re-election or election for the first time, to pledge to support the We the People Amendment. And this is at every level. So obviously we target a lot of folks who are running for Congress, but state legislators, other state offices like Attorney General, and then local offices as well, City Council, county supervisors, district attorney, anybody and everybody who wants to serve should understand this issue and have a position on it. So Pledge to Amend is now even stronger and bigger, but we first launched that campaign in 2016. We had our first leadership summit, which is our national conference in Washington, D.C., and our first lobby day, which we had none of us had ever done a lobby day at the state level, let alone going to Washington, D.C. And we don't have anybody on the ground in Washington, D.C. We're not a Beltway organization. But nonetheless, we had a really successful lobby day. Now we've done that every year since. We thought in 2018 we had lined up a Senate lead. I'm just going to name it. Senator Merkley from Oregon said that he would introduce the amendment. Then he backed out with no real explanation. So that was a disappointment. We thought we were almost there. We're going to continue to work on him because we now do have a lead lined up for the Senate for next year, and I believe it will actually happen this time. But to backtrack again, then Rick Nolan, who was our House lead for 3 different Congresses, retired, and we worked in 2018 to line up another person. We ended up choosing Pramila Jayapal. We had a couple different Congress members wanting to take the lead. We decided to work with her as organizer as well, and just one of the top leaders for all the issues that we support and why we are doing this amendment. So we're really happy to be working with her now. So in the past 10 years, we also have traveled all over the country. We've actually done we have been to every single state except for Alaska as part of our barnstorming tours. So we've literally done presentations in hundreds of communities, helped start affiliates there. And next year we will be going to Alaska. So we will have gone to all 50 states by the end of next year. So those are just some highlights from the last 10 years, some of the things that I'm excited about. One thing I am realizing I totally forgot to mention is if you have questions or comments, you can ask me them at any time. I'll take those at the end, but feel free to tweet at us and or comment on this Facebook feed, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So if you got any questions about any of that stuff, if you are listening and you are one of Move to Amend's awesome volunteers and you want to share another highlight that you were part of or that you remember, we've got a lot of history at this point, and we've come a really long way, and I'm really proud of all the work we've done, but we still have a ways to go. So you're listening to Move to Amend's monthly live report. I'm Caitlin Saposi-Belknap, Move to Amend's national director. For those of you who are new, Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. And reminder that if you share, help us spread the word about this broadcast with the hashtag Move to Amend, either retweet or share it on Facebook. We will pick 2 folks to win a Move to Amend t-shirt that we'd be happy to send to you for helping us spread the word. So don't forget to do that. If you're tuning in late, you can still get in on that by sharing right now. So that's the last 10 years. Normally I don't go through all that on this report. Excuse me, I just gotta adjust because the cat is stabbing my legs with her claws. But I do want to share some highlights from this year in particular, and then close up with what's been going on this month, and then some stuff that we've got coming up. So in May, we held our first Free the People National Day of Action, where groups all over the U.S. met and held rallies with their representatives, urging support for We the People Amendment. We've been trying to kind of escalate because now it's been 10 years. This amendment should have been passed already in terms of what's needed for our democracy and all the implications that it has. And so we're getting kind of fed up with a lot of these lawmakers who are ignoring us, especially those who make pledges that they'll support during election time and then don't come through when they actually get in office. And so Free the People was sort of our first escalation. We're going to be continuing that on into 2020, and I'll talk about that in a second. We also had our leadership summit in Washington, D.C. in June. So we had people from all corners of the country come to learn and develop their organizing and direct action skills. We got to hear from our House champion, Pramila Jayapal. We had our lobby day, and we grew our co-sponsorship numbers for the We the People Amendment. We secured a real commitment from a senator. Senator Markey from Massachusetts is going to be introducing the We the People Amendment next year. There's a little bit of work that we need to do, and he's doing to make sure that he's not introducing that by himself. So I'll talk about that now, because at the beginning of December, Keon, our grassroots director, and I traveled to DC for meetings with mostly Senate offices, although we met with a number of House offices as well. And we met with about 20 different Senate offices. Alfonso's going to share the list of kind of our top targets. So what Senator Markey has said is that he would like to have at least 5 other senators join him in the initial introduction of the amendment in the Senate. And he would like at least one of those members to be a member of the Judiciary Committee. So his office is working on securing support and coalition partners, and so are we. So if you are represented by any of the senators that Alfonso is sharing, and they're the senators from California, Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island, Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, and Brian Schatz from Hawaii, Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, Patty Murray from Washington, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, Tina Smith from Minnesota, John Tester from Montana, Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, Martin Heinrich from New Mexico, Jeff Merkley from Oregon, and also Wyden from Oregon should be on this list as well. Sherrod Brown from Ohio, Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, Cory Booker from New Jersey, and Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin from Illinois. Amy Klobuchar also from Minnesota, Jackie Rosen from Nevada, and Maria Cantwell also from Washington. So if any of those or multiple of those are your senators, we really need you to call them daily. At this point, we need you to aggressively pursue these folks. I know there's a lot going on in DC, and that is all the impeachment business is all any of them are talking about. Believe me, we just came from talking to them. But this is actually what they need to spend some energy on. So the way that you can help, no matter what you do, no matter who you're connected with, is calling them daily and publicizing your pressure on social media, retweeting our posts and using the hashtag time has come, and also co-sponsor the hashtag We the People Amendment. We need to get these 5 folks. We need to get this introduced in the Senate. We need to get this moving along. So we'll have more about that. I'll be back in DC in January and February because of impeachment going to the Senate in January. We'll see how quickly McConnell sort of shoves that aside, etc. But January is also the 10-year anniversary of the Citizens United decision, and so it's critical that we not let them sweep this under the rug, or say, oh, that's a long-term solution. This needs to be a short-term. This needs to be a now solution because the planet literally can't take it, if nothing else. I talked about our housing crisis. We've got a healthcare crisis. Who knows where our government is going to take us into war next? We've got a gun control crisis. All of those things connect to corporate rule. And all of those things will be more possible / protected after we pass legislation to address them with the We the People Amendment. And they will be vulnerable without the We the People Amendment to getting overturned in the Supreme Court. So on that note of Congress, we haven't forgotten, we're not stepping away from the House at all. We've got 66 co-sponsors, which is right where we wanted to be. I mentioned our 10-year strategic plan, so 65 was our goal in that plan for the end of this year. And so we are going to continue that on, and I think the goal is 75 next year, and if we can get more than that, great. But we don't just lobby Congress. We don't just call our Congress members. We've always believed that direct action is actually what is essential for movements, especially at a time like we're at now, where we've tried the phone calls. We've been trying the letters to the editor. We've been passing the resolutions and ballot initiatives. We have been targeting people as they've been running for office and getting them to promise to support the amendment. We have tried, education. We have been trying all these tactics, and we have moved the ball forward using them, and yet we're not where we need to be, which is the amendment passing. And that's when direct action has been essential for every single other movement that has had success, not just in U.S. history, but in the history of humanity. And so next year, starting with January 21st, which is the 10-year anniversary of the Citizens United ruling, we will be doing sit-in actions at a number of congressional offices, and we're going to continue that tactic of sit-ins and potentially people staying as long as needed, even being willing to risk arrest or get arrested by refusing to leave. So check out the campaign plan that Alfonso is going to share for your rep. It might be a little late to get in on our January 21st action, although not necessarily. It depends how quickly in January you're willing to get going. But if it is, then basically using that same process, we want to do another round of sit-ins in the spring as well. So getting started and working with us right now is how you can help build up to that. So I hope folks will participate. If you're not going to do a J21, is what we're calling it, action, you can also help us spread the word when it happens, because that's part of what's going to be important. And unfortunately, probably Congress, and therefore, all of the DC media and East Coast media will be talking about impeachment during that time. So it's going to be kind of hard for us to get our message in there. We don't know exactly what things will look like on that front, but we can't let that anniversary go by and not make a demand for the We the People Amendment. So that's what we're going to be doing, and then we're going to continue to use civil disobedience tactics on into 2020. Switching gears a little bit here, want to make sure everybody knows that our internship deadline has been extended to January 6th. So we're still looking for bright, energetic folks to join our Move to Amend intern team. So we've extended the deadline. And if you or someone you know is looking for a telecommute internship for school credit, or is just passionate about ending corporate greed, let them know that they have until January 6th to apply. There's a monthly stipend to cover internship costs and supplies. You do have to have a computer and phone and high-speed internet access, but you could be anywhere in the country. It's about 20 to 35 hours per week, depending on the time of year and the campaigns and kind of your schedule. So we're flexible there. So to apply for a spring internship with Move to Amend, visit movetoamend.org/internships before the deadline of January 6th, and Alfonso will share that link. And we also are looking for examples of corporate rule that are playing out in your community. We're planning to record a series of short videos that goes into more detail about how corporate personhood and its never-ending expanding power affects every single one of us. So if you have a corporate rule story you'd like to share, please let us know. You are listening to Move to Amend's monthly live report. I'm Caitlin Sposi-Belknap, Move to Amend's National Director. And for those of you who are new, Move to Amend is the national campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and make clear that corporations don't have constitutional rights and to get big money out of politics. Reminder that we are going to give away a t-shirt to one Twitter and one Facebook listener who shares our feed here with the hashtag Move to Amend to help us spread the word. All right, there's a lot going on with this report since I decided to do the whole decade. So thanks for staying with me. If you've got questions at any point, I'm happy to answer those. I'm coming up near the end. I just want to give a shout out to our local folks. So I am going to do the dispatch from the Grassroots next. So please stay with me, and we'll be back in just a sec. All right. So Move to Amend is a grassroots campaign. There are some of us who work at the national level, but all of us have a history of being community organizers ourselves, and we've structured our whole campaign around really the local organizing. So we have Move to Amend affiliates, and I want to give some shout outs to some awesome work that they've been doing. So shout out to Mount Shasta, California, Move to Amend for their solidarity with local environmental groups and water protectors. In addition to their work building support for the We the People Amendment, our folks in Mount Shasta have been waging a years-long campaign against crystal geysers and other corporate polluters who are trying to claim rights over public water sources in their community. Several of our grassroots leaders have been speaking at town halls, community forums, and participating in local climate actions, connecting the dots between their local water issues and the nature of corporate power. So we want to give our heartfelt thanks to Mount Shasta, California, Move to Amend for helping keep up the fight. Shout out to our affiliate leaders in Santa Clara County, California, Move to Amend, for their continued outreach in their local community, following their successful push on their county supervisors to join over 800 municipalities in passing a Move to Amend resolution. They've also been hard at work supporting building support from local community members and groups, securing endorsements from 350 Silicon Valley and the Dean Democratic Club, and keeping up the pressure on their U.S. House Rep Anna Eshoo, who still isn't a co-sponsor yet, but we're getting there. We really appreciate the dedication of our Santa Clara affiliate leaders and encourage everyone who lives in Santa Clara County, California to check them out at their next meeting and or a movie night next year. Special thanks to our leaders in Jefferson County, Washington, Move to Amend. They've been hard at work building support in the Puget Sound region, including a recent Defend Our Democracy event in support of local democracy initiatives. Keep an eye out for upcoming meetings in Port Townsend and other areas as they continue to seek new and existing groups to partner up with. Keep up with the great work, Jefferson County, Washington. Also want to give shout outs to Move to Amend state networks as they continue to grow and expand their work within their home state. Montanans Move to Amend continues to grow their reach into other Montana communities, building support in cities including Helena, Great Falls, and Miles City. They've been hard at work convincing candidates for U.S. House and Senate to sign the pledge to amend, as well as continued outreach to the League of Women Voters and Montana Conservation Voters. Special thanks to David and Mary for attending last month's Party of the Decade, celebrating 10 years of Move to Amend, visiting us in California from Montana. Alaska Move to Amend is growing by leaps and bounds following their success with the Anchorage City Council in becoming the largest Alaskan city to pass one of our resolutions in support of the amendment. They're working diligently to grow their organizing capacity to become our latest state network and currently organizing film screenings of Dark Money in communities, including Kenai. And we're looking forward to seeing how they develop and visiting Alaska, like I said, for our first barnstorming tour there next year. Our tireless leaders in Minnesota Move to Amend are gearing up for a big push in their state's 2020 legislature. Our folks in St. Paul area Move to Amend are working hard to get pledges from local city council candidates and elected officials, in addition to getting the jump on reintroducing the We the People Act, which will call on Congress to pass the We the People Amendment in their state legislature. And our folks in Lakes area Move to Amend Minnesota continue to organize educational presentations at local colleges, meeting with their congressional reps' offices, and getting ready to take action for the 10th anniversary of Citizens United in order to demand their Congress members decide which side they're on, these people or corporations and their billionaires. So stay tuned for opportunities to engage with our state network in Minnesota. And a shout out to our Ohio Move to Amend leaders for helping to organize 2019 Democracy Day hearings in these Ohio towns and cities: Cleveland Heights, Brecksville, Defiance, Mentor, Toledo, Chagrin Halls, Cleveland, South Euclid, Newburgh Heights, Shaker Heights, and Kent. Democracy Day hearings are an ongoing effort. All of the towns listed have passed ballot initiatives calling on their congressional representatives to pass the We the People Amendment, but also mandating that their local government hold a hearing either once a year or every other year, depending on the town, called a Democracy Day hearing. And at that venue, at that event, the city is responsible for providing the public an opportunity to understand what they have done to make progress towards the We the People Amendment since the last hearing. And also, oftentimes it ties to other issues of democracy or election integrity that are going on in the local community or region. So these Democracy Day hearings will continue on until the amendment is passed, and they provide a forum and place for an ongoing organizing opportunity to support the We the People Amendment. So rather than just having a ballot initiative pass one day and then, you know, later on people don't even remember that it happened, this is an ongoing way. So it's a more powerful ballot initiative that these folks have passed, and it's a model that we're wanting to use in other places as well. So fantastic job to everyone in those towns in Ohio for your ongoing work there. So that's my report. I would love to answer your questions if you've got any. We can take some time to do that. And then I will announce the winners of the t-shirts for helping spread the word soon. So does anybody have any questions for me? You can just type them in. If you're on Instagram, I can see you and I can take your questions right away. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, you can tweet the questions to us or put them in the comments of this feed, and Alfonso will let me know since I'm not looking at that live. So any questions or comments? We're ready for you now. Let's see, I'll give Alfonso a minute to check all the different platforms. Let's see. Karen asks, how can I get involved? Well, the best thing to do, so Move to Amend, like I've said, is structured as a grassroots campaign. So we really encourage folks to get plugged in at your local level. So if there is an affiliate near you, plugging in with them is what is the best way to get involved with Move to Amend. But if there's not, you can start one up. And we're actually in 2020 going to have a new opportunity for folks as individuals to become Move to Amend supporters, advocates in your community as a step towards the path of affiliating. So the best way to get started with all of that is to go to movetoamend.org/volunteer, fill out the form there, which is a pretty simple form, just letting us know if you've got areas of interest and or skills that you want to bring to the table, and one of our awesome interns will give you a call to have an initial conversation and get started. If you don't know what you would want to do yet, if you've never done organizing before, that's okay. We can still plug you in. If for whatever reason getting involved at the local level isn't your cup of tea, there are some opportunities to get involved nationally. For example, we do have an interfaith caucus. So if you are a person of any faith that wants to help us reach out to other interfaith folks and bring this issue to churches, synagogues, mosques, and other religions, you could plug in with the Interfaith Caucus. We also have a labor caucus if you're connected with the labor movement, either actively now or as a retired member. We also have a Next Gen caucus. So if you're under 35, that's our caucus for young people. And so those are some of the ways to plug in nationally. We also have some national committees. So if you're connected to the law, if you're a lawyer or have some history in law or have some expertise in law or history, you could plug in with our law and research committee. We also have opportunities through our internship program. So that would be another way that you plug in. Lots of times our interns are younger folks, but not always. So we've definitely had some people who are retired who intern with us as well. And the internship program is really set up to be an opportunity to really plug in and be a member of our national team. It's not make copies and run errands, kind of internship. So all of those are ways. But again, movetoamend.org/volunteer would be the best place to go to get started, and we can have a conversation with you to find out what makes sense. Renee wants to know how many co-sponsors are needed to get this initiative passed. So to amend the Constitution, 2/3 of both houses of Congress need to pass the amendment. And then it goes to the states for ratification, and then 3/4 of state legislatures need to ratify it. So we still have a ways to go when we're at 66 right now, and just getting it introduced in the Senate soon. But that's how you get started, is to build, and we've grown every single year, and we'll continue to do that. So that's the answer. 2/3 of both houses of Congress and then 3/4 of state legislatures is ultimately needed to pass the amendment. Let's see. David asks, if it's taking a while to find 6 sponsors in the Senate, what is the likelihood of finding a 2/3 majority in both houses to vote for the amendment? Well, that's the reality of the situation that we're in, unfortunately. Our congressional leadership is, for the most part, in the pocket of big corporate interests. Pick your poison. And in terms of which industry they're serving, it depends kind of what's operating in their community. But we don't live, I would say we don't really live in any kind of functioning democracy, and I would say we never have, but it's gotten worse and worse and worse with a smaller and smaller number of people who are actually in any way served by our government. So that's the reality of where we are, and there's a ways to go before we would get to them responding to us. That's part of why it's important that we escalate our tactics. There are other movements that have been successful with larger odds than we're up against, or maybe equal ones. For example, the movement to end slavery. The entire economic system, it wasn't just that there was slavery and that was normal. The entire economic system was built on the slave trade and having slaves. And there were people who organized using similar tactics for a different era, so updated to what we've been using here at Move to Amend, in terms of local actions, in terms of resolutions, in terms of running people for office on a different platform. And so that's what we're doing. Part of what we've been working on is getting the political parties to call for this amendment. So, for example, the Green Party has it as part of its platform. We've worked in some places with libertarians. There are some Republican at the local level. Uh, um, um, what is the word I'm trying to say? Locals who have been supportive of the amendment and putting that in their local platform. There are numerous Democratic Party state level platform changes, and we've been working at the national level as well. So that's part of the process as well, is that anybody who's running for office, but we live in a system of corporate rule, so we're not, this is not a measure that's right around the corner. However, if we are going to get any kind of solution for the climate crisis, if we are going to get any solution for the healthcare crisis, then we're going to need this amendment as well. And so as we advance the issues that touch down and are impacted by corporate rule, we have to also make the connection to why we need this amendment, because without it, even if we're able to get those that legislation passed, it will either be sued in the Supreme Court, or some other level of court, and then work up to the Supreme Court for violating corporate constitutional rights, and/or the money in politics piece of it will make that something that could be reversed later. And so we need the amendment. It's critical. Let's see. David is asking also, what's the target year for passing the amendment? I'm just trying to really quickly skim through here, because off the top of my head, so we adopted our 10-year strategic plan in 2016, and so 2026 is when we would like to see, when our goal is to get the amendment passed through Congress, and then the ratification process would begin. Obviously, we need it sooner than 2026, but we felt as though that was a pace that was manageable given where we were at. If we can do it faster, then we certainly will. So per that deadline, say, we are on track so far for the House growth. We are behind on the Senate growth, although as soon as it is introduced in the Senate, then we can work to catch up. So we wanted to have it introduced in the Senate the last Congress, and we wanted to be at 15 co-sponsors now. We're shooting for 5 with the initial introduction, and if we can get to 10 by the end of next year. It's all kind of arbitrary, right? There's no magic formula. It's that we ultimately need to get there, and we need to go as fast as possible, and the way that we do that is to apply pressure. And so coming up with all the different angles for applying pressure. That's why we pass the resolutions to educate voters and regular people. And we do that by ballot initiative whenever possible. We also do a lot of educational forums and events and things like that. And then we also, target people who are running for office. We target people when they're in office with the lobbying and the pressure that way. And soon we're going to start to escalate and do civil disobedience to make clear that, we're not going away, and that it is time for them to act. Let's see, I've got a couple of questions here on Instagram. So is there a Democratic presidential candidate who is sponsoring Move to Amend, Sanders or Warren, for example? So Senator Sanders in August said that we was at a campaign event here in California, and one of our interns actually asked him publicly on video if he would introduce the We the People amendment in the Senate, and he said the answer is yes. But then we learned that that was not the plan from his Senate office, at the time at least. So we've actually had a pressure campaign on Sanders for the last few months since then. Did have a positive meeting with his Senate office when we were there earlier this month, and I'm optimistic that Sanders will be one of the 5 who stands with Senator Markey. He also launched an initiative as kind of one of his platform pieces, saying that he was going to introduce an amendment to address, to make clear that only human beings have constitutional rights and that money is not speech, but he hasn't done that either. And this is the amendment to do that. And it wouldn't make any sense. I mean, one, from the conversation that we had with their office, I don't see him having another one that he's talking about. Also, why would he not work with the grassroots movement that's been building up the pressure for this for the last 10 years? And so we haven't been as happy with Senator Sanders on this. He certainly has been talking about it for a really long time. And last time he ran for president, he talked about it a lot too. But putting his money where his mouth is would be introducing it in the Senate or being co-sponsor with Senator Markey, right? So if you're a Sanders supporter, you should encourage him. My understanding is he just opened up his DMs in Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, you can tell him that this is an issue that really matters to you when you message him, and we'll be looking to do that. And then Senator Warren specifically. So our Massachusetts folks, our Massachusetts friends have been doing a lot of really good work. They're the ones who got Senator Markey to agree to be the lead. And so far, Senator Warren hasn't been responsive on this. We just were able to meet with her senior counsel in the last visit to DC. And it was a positive meeting. So I'm hopeful that she'll, I don't know what happened there, but Instagram just turned off. I'll turn it back on, I guess. Sorry, hold on one second, peeps. So we're hopeful that she would also be one of the 5, although I would say that there's still a bit of work to do to make me feel confident that that's where we're at. So if you're a Senator Warren, if you're a Warren supporter for president, then letting her know as well that there's no way to end political corruption without this amendment. And really, she already should be on board, right? And then the other question that I got on Instagram was is Giramundi, Representative Giramundi, a co-sponsor yet? And the answer is no. And we are looking to potentially target his office as part of the J21 action. So if you could contact us, person who potentially is in his district, I'm assuming that's why you're asking. Again, probably actually just going directly to jessica@movetoamend.org. It's an email address of our program director. She would love to talk to you about plugging in and targeting Giramundi. Let's see. Stanley asks, legalized democracy is 30 minutes. Is anyone working on a shorter, high-impact video? We are working on some shorter videos. As I mentioned earlier, yes. They're going to be made in-house. So we actually had to do all the fundraising for legalized democracy to launch it. And so we would need to do that again. We did like a Kickstarter campaign basically for this 30-minute video that we have as an introduction to Move to Amend. And we are probably due to do that again soon. So I'm not sure if that's something that we'll do in 2020. But we are looking to do shorter videos that would be easier to share on social media. So stay tuned for that. And if you would like to help support us in doing that, then it would be great for you to make a donation, make that possible, which I will talk about in just a second. So last call. Does anybody else have any questions? Awesome. TGCR from Instagram. Please connect with us. Let's talk about how to target Giramundi. Last call, Alfonso. Thanks for your questions, everybody. Appreciate that. It's always nice to know that you're out there. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more. If you're tuning into this video not live, you can certainly ask your questions in the comments and we will answer them. And happy to do that. Awesome. Tom, I look forward to connecting with you about Giramundi as a fellow Northern Californian. All right, so I will be back in just a second to share the winners of the t-shirts. But before that, we always try to wrap up with a inspirational clip. So it's the Move to Amend Hell Yeah moment. This is a 17-year-old indigenous activist, Helena Walinga, from the Ecuadorian Amazon, who called out world leaders at the UN Climate Change Conference, the COP25, for their criminal negligence. Greta Thunberg obviously gets a lot of duly deserved adoration and support for her leadership, but the reality is the younger generations are stepping up for and demanding that our leaders act because their futures have potentially been stolen from them, and they are doing that left and right really eloquently and inspirationally. So I want to share with you Helena Bolinga's comments, and then I'll come back and share the winners of the sharing. I want to almost said raffle, but it's not a raffle. All right, check out the Move to Amend Hell Yeah moment.
La Juventud contra el Cambio Climático se tomó la cumbre COP25 y una de sus voces provino desde Ecuador. Se trata de Elena Gualinga, de 17 años, oriunda de la Amazonía ecuatoriana, quien denunció la inacción de los gobiernos para detener el cambio climático en un emotivo discurso.
Fossil fuels are increasing in countries like Ecuador. The governments of our countries keep concessioning our territories without our consent to the extractive industries that are creating climate change. This should be criminal.
La adolescente de la comunidad Sarayaku de la provincia de Pastaza insistió en que los indígenas son los más afectados por la crisis climática y reprochó la falta de acción de los líderes mundiales para detener las afectaciones.
I, as a young person, I'm disappointed in world leaders. I'm disappointed that we have come such a long way here to COP. And the things that are important to us are not being discussed.
La participación de los jóvenes en la cumbre de la ONU sobre el clima también contó con la intervención de la activista sueca Greta Thunberg, quien resaltó la urgencia por detener cuanto antes los efectos del calentamiento global. La emergencia climática no es algo que nos impactará en el futuro, es algo que tiene impacto en los niños que viven hoy. Ya está afectando a un sinnúmero de personas ahora y las personas están sufriendo y muriendo hoy. Pese a la denuncia de los jóvenes y la creciente presión social con manifestaciones en todo el mundo exigiendo acciones concretas para detener el cambio climático, la cumbre llega a su etapa decisiva sin medidas contundentes para reducir su impacto.
All right. So, I want to announce the winners for helping to spread the word. So, Naya Sala from Twitter. If you send us a direct message with your address and what size t-shirt you would like, we'll get that in the mail to you. And Stanley Pokras on Facebook, if you send us a direct message with the same, we'll get a t-shirt out to you. Thanks to everybody who helped spread the word. And I just want to say one more time, tomorrow we're launching our end of the year donation drive. We need to raise $150,000 by the end of the year. In all honesty, it's a little bit rough fundraising for a long-term issue like this, even though it connects to every single issue, even though people tell us all the time that this is the most important thing, and this is why I do this work, because I think this is the most strategic action that we can work on to address so many issues at once. But with the presidential campaigns going on, with so many elections actually in 2020, not just the presidential campaigns, with the climate crisis, with the crisis at the border and the concentration camps that Trump has put in play and expanded, with so many issues going on, it is harder to raise money for a longer term effort like this that isn't going to see the answer next year. But the reality is, if we don't invest in this movement, then none of the rest of the work that we're doing is going to be possible. I really believe that. And so if you would make a donation to Move to Amend to help us raise that money for the end of the year and keep going strong so we can do this work, so we can build this foundation for a democracy movement in the United States, which we so desperately need. You can go to movetoamend.org/donate, and a reminder that everybody who donates starting today until the end of the year, midnight on December 31st, will be entered into a raffle. We'll raffle off some of Move to Amend's items from our store. So $28 or more will get you entered into the raffle. And I'll be doing the drawing on Tuesday, January 7th, at our first webinar of the year, which is different than our live report here. We do the live report on the last Wednesday of every month. normally, although not this time because of the holidays. But on January 7th, I'd love you to join me and members of our team as we kick off our Take Action call and let you know how you can get involved in Move to Amend in 2020. So Alfonso will share the RSVP link for you to join our Take Action webinar. And then you can tune in with me as well next time on January 29th. I will be here for the January Move to Amend live report. We'll talk about how things went with the J21 actions. I'll also be in DC for 2 weeks in January, so I'll be back by the 29th, but I'll be able to share with you how we're doing on the Senate work and all the plans that we have going on that will already be in motion for 2020. So put that on your calendar. Last Wednesday of every month, I'd love to see you back again here. Thanks so much to Jason and Alfonso for helping to make this broadcast possible. And I want to, as we close out, our closing has acknowledgement of all of our staff team who are awesome and do this work tirelessly every day. So thank you to all of you for your support. So happy holidays, everyone. Happy close of the decade. Happy New Year. Here's to 2020, looking very, very different than the path that we're on now. I think we're actually closer to being able to make the kind of change that we need than ever before, but there's still a lot of work to do and we need you. So thanks for participating with Move to Amend. See you next year. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Corporations are not people too. Money is not speech. Man, in fact, it's the root of all right now. We have the right to be free. Corporations are not people too. Money is not speech. Man, in fact, it's the root of all right now. Nothing defends your democracy.
Have you recently read the Constitution? There seems to be some type of confusion. I thought it said the people were the institution and not the corporations that simply want to use them. The truth is currently a fusion of corporate loot and our government that is outright abusive. People need change. The state, it refuses. They're saying we're mistaken. Well, show us where the proof is. They control the media, movies, and the music and determine where supplies of the water and food live. We need a strategy. Here is a solution. Build a movement to give our rulers improvements.